And we're live.
Ole!
Man, it's been a while since we put one of these up. I'm glad that we're able to get this worked out. We just got college kicking back into gear, so I've been, putting together new syllabi and talking about COVID compliance, of course.
Boy.
And we've some of that's kind of a moving target, because I'm teaching at 3 different colleges, and so all the rules are a little different depending.
So you're saying you're a super spreader?
Yeah, that's the vocalists. Actually.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's not the guitar players. Guitar players, you actually have to remind them to breathe.
It's like man spreading. It's like I'm a super spreader. So.
Oh no! Right out of the gate.
Sorry, I apologize.
Right out of the gate. Okay. Yeah.
So what has that been like? Has it been stressful? Every college has different requirements, I bet.
Yeah, it's stressful. But if you have a good team around you, I think my colleagues are all, they're really awesome people. I really like working with them. They're all incredibly talented, but also, pretty humble people. So it makes it pretty easy to plan, right? Because there's just people who really want to make things work, and we've all been locked in at home, so we're just kind of glad to sort of see each other, even if it's at a distance with masks on,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, basically at one college, public college, they're not doing any in person, right? So much of what I'm doing right now is all online, and that has its challenges, but we've had a lot of time since March to kind of get things a little bit together,
right?
And I've I use a lot of this equipment actually for it, which is helpful, but my students don't have that. Right. And so it's good for when, they want to observe me, but it makes my job, teaching guitar, a little bit more challenging.
Right.
But we've done some other things for some kinds of in-person meetings, like putting up plexiglass shields and all of that, making sure that there's very few people in a room and all that. So, I feel pretty safe, but yeah, I had this conversation with one class that I teach, and had some incoming freshmen who were really weirded out by all of this. And just, it's a weird way to start your college career. It's a weird way for many of them. It's their first time out of home.
Right.
And I just remember my first semester of college was it started the last couple of weeks, I guess, a week and a half of August of 2001, right? So 2 weeks later, 9/11 happened. Right. And I remember being in my bed and my roommate waking me up. He's like, "We're under attack," and all this, and obviously it was a very traumatic experience, and it changed. We weren't in the kind of protracted lockdown that we're in now.
Right.
But it changed. It changed the world forever. The way we get on airplanes, the way it changed a lot. So when I kind of related that to them, they kind of were like, okay, this is, the world experiences traumas, and we can kind of get through this together.
Right.
But yeah, it's been tricky.
Uh-huh.
I've gotten better at doing things like using online courses and things so that students really feel like they have kind of a path through the semester. I'm still learning, because there's a lot there.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. This is kind of becoming the new normal, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it is temporary, I know you're kind of you have to respond to advances in the medical community, but has there been any discussion among academics as to when they think things are going to loosen up, at least, as far as private lessons go, or choirs? I know, there's a big issue there.
Yeah, so being in the humanities side of things, we really lean very heavily on the hard sciences and on the medical science to follow our lead,
right?
Because we're so removed from that kind of information. We really rely heavily on what we hear from the CDC and what we hear from our local government and from the state government and the federal government and all that. And they obviously famously don't line up very often.
Yeah.
And that tends to be, I think, one of the greater sources of stress doing college teaching. Private students for me, outside of the college, I do my best to stay as sensitive as possible. Everything from online to in person with precautions.
Yeah.
Because you got to make a living. That's the thing.
Right.
And especially in, it should be no surprise to anyone that music is a challenging industry to be in. We've taken a big hit in our numbers, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if it's the college or in a private studio somewhere in your home. I mean, I don't have anybody coming to the house now. I used to have a number of them. But since this, I just not super comfortable with it.
Right. Yeah.
It's tricky.
Yeah,
It's
it is
tricky.
tough. And we mentioned it before. I mean, we're both musicians, and so we're both connected to this world very closely. And I've seen personally, firsthand what it's done to the music community locally, and I can't imagine. It seems like it's pretty difficult to manage. And I've had an interesting experience. We both play at a church here in Fort Worth every Sunday, and there's a couple nurses at the church, a doctor, and then I have a couple degrees in the sciences, and so they've the music director actually asked me and the nurses and the doctor in the congregation, our opinions on the choir wearing masks, the congregation wearing masks, cleaning, sanitizing, things like this. And, all of a sudden, at least I found myself in a situation where we were put in a position of responsibility. We were put in a position of responsibility where, we're kind of making rules up on the fly,
Right.
And clearly the doctor, it would be the most authoritative voice. And I've read a lot of research on how they're approaching, sanitizing different environments, from, choirs to, cruise ships to whatever. And one thing I've learned is that there's not an authoritative expert with years of experience on sanitizing different types of environments for COVID-19, because it just doesn't exist. So there's a lot of, like we talked with Dr. Phillips last time, there's a lot of learning on the fly that's going on right now. And that's one of the tricky parts of kind of what we're going through right now. And I had a doctor tell me the other day something that I thought was really interesting, and that was that there is no living expert on COVID-19. It's relatively new, and we're all learning together. And, that's why I think getting authoritative data and good information is difficult, because we're kind of parsing this out as we go. So it puts us all in this difficult situation,
Yeah, teaching college right now, there's a lot of things going on because universities, local colleges, private colleges, they're large institutions, and there's a lot of things surrounding, of course, the pandemic, but also the equity movement, right? Or equality movement, depending on where you are within the movement,
right?
And so they're trying to increase their protections there as well. So it's making for a lot of
a lot of CYA is what you're saying.
It's a lot of training that we're going through right now. And like with the Title IX stuff, Title IX, for those of you who aren't familiar, Title IX covers protections for minority groups and groups that are considered at high risk, for being taken advantage of, or like the elderly, the disabled, this kind of thing. And so we've implemented some stuff, like when a student comes in for lessons, we go through this Title IX and we, let them know that if, they've experienced anything, that they have resources, which has been great, because we put it in the syllabus, and we used to have, I think the number I was told over the course of a year, at one, the largest place where I teach, which encompasses 60 something thousand people, we had something like 40 maybe a semester. And when we put that in the syllabus, from then on, we had 40 inside of the first month or something.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, there's this real big problem with online stalking. And it's usually, like an ex-boyfriend or something like that.
Right.
And people they don't know about resources. Maybe they're really nervous, or they're scared to come forward. They don't realize there are protections, things like that. So just putting that in the document was incredibly helpful.
Right.
And so people have been able to report these things and feel like they actually have some kind of protection. The tricky part is the reporting procedures are pretty tough in terms of, if a student were to tell me, a student can't tell me really anything in confidence, right? Mm-hmm. That's also something we have to tell them. If they tell me anything, I have to report it. If I don't, I can be brought up on charges and I lose my job immediately.
Wow.
Right? So it's pretty intense.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes, if a student says, claims that I overheard something in a hallway, mm-hmm. right? They can bring that claim forward, and then, I can get in trouble there. Also, even if I maybe didn't hear it, then I'm kind of put in a defensive position. So I think, that's pretty tough. You kind of go,
sure.
Okay, well, it's not that I think that would happen. Mm-hmm. I mean, you'd have to be kind of a student would have to have some kind of vendetta against you. And I just don't, I mean, you
it could happen,
hear,
but I mean, that's some like single white female stuff that might.
Yeah, that gets into some really strange
Hollywood,
strange territory.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying it can't happen,
right?
But I'm not concerned about it.
Right.
I mean, if I was to hear something, that was clearly wrong, I mean, I would definitely say something to that student, and I would certainly, have to report it. I mean,
it's a weird position to be in, though. I mean, also that, this institution is kind of can be the judge, jury, and executioner, like I mean, I'm sure there is a point at which, like, you have to let authorities know about what's going on.
Yeah, of course.
But I'm sure, we hear stories all the time about things being handled in-house at universities and private schools and things like that. And you always wonder, how legal is this? Is it, what's the legal backing? And at what point are they kind of just keeping things like under the rug?
Yeah.
Just to keep bad PR from happening.
This, I guess that really gets into kind of a separate subject, because Title IX really has to do specifically with law, and there was at one point a lot of those powers that were handed over to the universities, and this kind of as things started to kind of reform was really under the Obama administration, and I've been teaching for 12 years, right? So I've been in since basically the last year of the George W. Bush administration. If I'm getting my time, I'm growing older by the minute, but up through. So I've seen some of the changes, and I think, at one point there was a lot that was put in the power, of the university and the college, and some of those things have shifted. And so now, in Texas, in Title IX is very strong, right? Because of, the Baylor controversy.
Right.
I'm not going to get into that because it's pretty heavy. But
that's what everybody thinks of when they think of Title
IX.
Right.
Yeah. And, if you don't know it, then look it up, excuse me.
Oh, my bad.
Error there. But anyways, if you're curious, I mean, I would encourage you to look it up, because it was an important issue. And Texas, I felt, really responded as best as best they could. I mean, it wasn't a weak response, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
Baylor's had a bad go of it over the past 15 years because they had the big controversy with the football team. What's going on over there in Waco?
That's it.
God intended us to drive through Waco and not stop, not spend 4 years there.
I can think of some people that graduated with us they're like shaking their fist right now if they're listening.
It's a joke, people. I mean, I went to school in Denton. I mean, come on, for way too long.
Yeah. I was there for a long time as well.
Yeah, between our family and we built that new football stadium. I mean,
it's a lot of tuition.
One, two,
a lot of mean green.
Three of us? Four of us.
Colin also.
Bailey, you and me.
Yeah, and I got 3 degrees from there.
And then I went and gave them more money, but from Fort Worth. The Health Science Center.
Right. Yeah, we're about as green as it gets. In fact, I got my curtains over here. Let's see. You can see them. This was a gift from a student of mine. His wife made these beautiful UNT.
Dude, that's legit.
Yeah, thanks. I like them. They're pretty cool.
Anyways.
Yeah, super. I have cool students. They're awesome. There's issues like that, but then there are other issues that I think are not as front of mind for a lot of the public because it doesn't really exist. I mean, the concerns of your everyday person who's just struggling paycheck to paycheck is not the same as it is at the university necessarily.
Right.
There was a case at UNT of a math professor who was fired. I think it was October or November of last year because he had kind of ridiculed, I guess, the idea of microaggressions.
Okay.
And so the department, in writing, in email, fired him for it.
So I mean, I hear microaggressions all the time, and I don't really know what is a microaggression. I mean, I have an idea of what I think it is, but I don't know. Like, what's the definition of a microaggression?
Sure. So it's a good question, and actually, I mean, it's important to know. Because I've had this discussion with a couple of good friends about this, and and there's a lot of, when we have words like this that kind of get into the zeitgeist, they end up with a lot of different definitions.
Because you have the idea of like the spoiled college kid who's like can't take a joke and gets offended and has to go on like cry and blah 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 blah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I really don't like the whole use of like snowflake and on one side, or social justice warrior and that kind of thing. I think that's really unproductive. I mean, whether or not someone's sensitivity is hyper calibrated, if you're wanting to help somebody, or if you view something as being true about your life or how to live, you should use teaching language, right?
It's
that is not. It's really sloppy.
It's sloppy because
super ham-fisted.
It's kind of like the same people who get upset at that, or the same people who get mad because this person voted for Trump, so he has to be a racist,
right? Or this person, voted for Hillary or Biden or Bernie, so they have to be
a snowflake,
right? Yeah, and this, like.
It's
I wish people would talk to each other a little bit more. That might be helpful.
Right. And realize things like, it's coming from a scientific perspective, in the biological sciences, we're so sloppy. Biology is so gray. Mm-hmm. There's no black and white. But our minds, I think it's a reflection of Western culture maybe, or... I don't know what are the need to organize just to be able to function, is we want to codify and label and keep things separate. And there's a black and a white, this is this and that. Okay, I can go on with my day. And that's not the way nature operates. That's not the way society operates. I mean, people are messy.
People are very
people's
messy.
Motivations and the way they live their lives are everyone has contradictions, and the way they think and their motivations for doing certain things, and
right.
Anyways,
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and so this idea of the microaggression. So I wrote a paper on it during my DMA, but there's actually a book that gets into it a bit that actually just turned two years old a couple of weeks ago, and the title actually isn't really very beloved by the authors because they felt like it was pretty prohibitive, of certain people reading it.
the co-authors.
Yeah, the co-authors. There's two.
Okay.
So you have Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. And the book is called The Coddling of the American Mind, right? And it's one of the most useful books that I've read. And they don't like the title because it's like you snowflake kind of thing. But the publishing house...
Coddle is a difficult word.
Yeah, the publishing house, when you work with a big publisher, they oftentimes get carte blanche on titling and your artwork. Right. So it was actually named after an article. They had written an article that I think was out in the Atlantic, and it had this sort of longer title, and then the Atlantic editor retitled it.
Okay.
And so so it got retitled, and it was called The Coddling of the American Mind. So
that was clearly a marketing decision, sell more books.
Yeah, it's a red meat name.
Yeah.
So I really, it frustrates me, as an educator who cares about education and cares about students, that a title would be prohibitive. But anyways, so I do recommend anyone, even if you're not a teacher, just read the book. It's really excellent.
I'm familiar with his work. I don't know this book, but I'm familiar with his area of research. I haven't read the book though.
Yeah, I mean, so Haidt is a professor of social psychology at the Stern School of Business at NYU.
Okay.
And Greg Lukianoff was a lawyer who did some work with the ACLU, and so this is not like your Republican kind of pedigree, right? So these are people who are fairly liberally minded. This is not. But they're really honest people, and for example, Haidt wrote another book called The Righteous Mind, and he actually set out to write the book to aid the Obama campaign, I think in 2008 or something like that. But what he discovered about the way people vote and the way they think was that the sort of political polls in the way they orient around care is actually very similar.
Okay.
And the way that they orient around other people in a community and the way they communicate is just they operate. They're more similar than they are different.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And because he's an honest social psychologist, he wrote the book based on that rather than what he originally intended to do, which was to help a campaign out.
Right.
So I have to give him a lot of credit for that. And Greg Lukianoff got involved in the project of writing The Coddling because he went into a severe suicidal clinical depression and was hospitalized. Mm-hmm. He attempted suicide, and so he became very concerned with mental health. He went through cognitive behavioral therapy, and it really turned his life around. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is credited with being the most successful therapy, non-pharmaceutical therapy for PTSD, for example. It's really high success rate for PTSD. So they wrote this book together, and one of the chapters, a long way around to get to your original question, was on the concept of microaggressions, right? And I had actually done this paper before I read this book. I think I took that class before the book had even come out. Because the book came out in 2018, and this course I took was in January, the spring of 2017. Mm-hmm. So the concept comes from a professor, Durald Wing Su, who is a teacher. At the time, he was at the University of Columbia Teachers College, and I think he also is a professor of psychology at Harvard now.
Wow.
And basically, the idea was that it's kind of everyday slights or commonplaces that are done kind of innocently, or maybe you don't intend anything wrong. Like maybe you're asking somebody, you see somebody of color, and you say, where are you from? you know, and then they speak with a Texan accent, you know, and really what that person was thinking, where are you from originally? Like they think you're from, you know, some other place outside of the States.
Right.
You're from India or Africa or wherever, Latin
I'm
American country.
you. Yeah.
Right. You know, and this can be irritating to people. Right.
Right.
And we sort of get that, but the person didn't intend really to offend anybody. They were just sort of curious, and it was just sort of something that they ask.
There's so much going on there.
There's a lot.
I
So
mean,
the criticism really of the terms microaggression, I think that are valid, because I am certain that it's irritating, because I talk to people, you know, who are born at, you know, the same hospital you and I were, Harris Methodist here in Fort Worth, that have told me. And these aren't just people who, you know, vote blue every time. You know, they go, I don't like this.
Right.
You know, and so I can totally get that.
Right.
It was just, I went to Germany once, and I got in 2 different taxi cabs. I've been twice, but one time I got in 2 different taxi cabs. I told them that I was from Texas, and this was during the W administration. First question, what do you think about W? Second question, do you own a gun? Third question, do you own a horse?
Yeah. I had
in 2 different taxis.
Experience.
Yeah. You know, and I mean, you know, being Texan is sort of like kitschy thing, and you know, it's kind of funny. And you laugh.
Europeans love Texans.
So
much.
You know,
Brazilians love Texans.
Yeah.
Too.
It was Brazil got that cowboy culture too.
Yeah. It's
there's
like
a couple of world champion bull riders from Brazil, twins that live down in Stephenville, not far from here.
They make awesome knives too. And they're great at jujitsu. Yeah, because that's where it's from.
Yeah. So anyway, so the idea is that it's not a microaggression is not an overt act of racism, right? So it's not like you're using some slur or something like that.
But it doesn't even have to be about race, right? It can just be anything.
No,
just be something that.
Initially, the definition was specifically really about race. Okay. But it later became more broad.
Okay.
Right. So if you look it up now, and you look it up in the American Psychiatric Association, there's papers there and that kind of thing. You can take a look at it. But I think the thoughtful criticism of it is, if somebody does something on accident, it's not an aggression. It's not a micro or a macro aggression. If somebody does something on purpose, aggressive, it's not micro. Right. And so I mean, and it gets into this more in the book, and so what the concern here is kind of over the linguistic territory, because what we're also seeing is a massive increase of anxiety, depression, and suicide rate that are kind of going up in tandem in young people. And originally they were like, oh, it's you millennials, you know. And for those of you, I mean, it's 1982 to 1995, 1996, right? So I was born in December of 82, so I'm on the very oldest end of the millennial generation. And actually, when they look at the attitudes of millennials, they're actually very similar to Generation X and even the boomers, right?
Okay.
Right? Who people like to rag on, but when you look at attitudes towards certain things, it tends to actually tack very close,
right?
But once you get into the iGen or the sort of younger folks, so it's 95 to whatever. I don't know. I don't know if we're at the end of that and we're into something else now. But one thing that they're reporting, you know, is we're using these concepts like verbal violence and microaggressions and things like this, is they're reporting PTSD at a higher and getting diagnosed.
Okay.
You know, so what's happened is we are basically, the idea is similar is not same. Okay, so when it is true that the effects of verbal bullying and the effects of physical violence have similar psychological effects, right? So if you're bullied and picked on, you can become afraid,
right?
For
like
example,
if you were
just on a basic,
like physically bullied.
right, just like as if you were physically bullied. However, the overall psychological effects are not the same between the two, between physical abuse and verbal abuse.
Yeah.
Right. So it's sort of the acting theory is that we are in this sort of culture of safetyism, that we may be convincing these young people into PTSD. I know. I know that
we have entered the rabbit hole.
We are way into the rabbit hole, but this is a legitimate concern.
This
because
is when you know you live in a very prosperous, comfortable society.
Right. Yeah. So
this is what happens when it's easy to find water.
Yeah. So first of all, just so you know,
I'm not trying to be insensitive, but
well, okay. So my opinion on this is on this information, or the way that I approach it.
Right.
Is that I'm a college teacher.
Right.
I teach adults. Right. So teaching, whether you're teaching adults or you're teaching children, they come with unique challenges.
Right.
You know, I don't want to take any tact that makes my job harder to do. Right. So I don't want to alienate people on left or right or center.
Right.
I just want to present the facts that I as I understand them.
Right.
And then allow those things to be tested, basically, like to enable critical thinking. So the idea is, you know, you give a student the ability, you teach them how to think, not what to think. You know, I don't want a bunch of carbon copies of myself running around. You remember that movie, Multiplicity?
Yeah.
Right. So you remember number 4, the one who was a copy of a copy,
right?
Right. You know, and he wore a boot on his head and was, you know, always asking for pizza and he was like nailing a rubber boot to a board at one point.
Count Chocula.
And he loved Count Chocula. That's right. So Michael Keaton is brilliant.
That leg's got to come off.
Really awesome, terrible movie.
Oh, it's so good.
So you know,
Michael Keaton as Michael Keaton.
I feel like if I treat my duty as a college teacher as someone as you know, an opportunity to preach at people about what my particular ethics are,
right.
I'm going to create a copy of a copy,
a bunch of Stevens.
You know, I've distilled, you know, whatever facts that I've been fortunate enough to encounter into a body of information, and hopefully have a system of ethics that causes as little harm as possible.
But I mean, at the end of the day, you're getting these people that are very formed, you know, by their parents and their life situations and by their culture that they grew up in. I mean, you can't take somebody who's been, you know, impacted heavily and has already been sent on a trajectory in a certain direction and be expected to completely change it in a semester. It's not going to happen. I mean, you can try and you can give them these tools, but I think that, you know, you're really fighting an uphill battle if you get someone who their mind is made up that, you know, they're going to be the way they are and that they've got it all figured out. You can't be expected to turn them into, you know, an objective, you know, scholar in a semester or a year, because I mean, they're going to be difficult to reach. It's not impossible. I'm not trying to sound nihilistic about, you know, teaching these individuals, but I mean, we all know those people who you know, their mind's pretty much made up, you know, and I'm sure you've had students that was just like, gosh, I can't reach them, you know, and I can think of, you know, colleagues I have that they're stuck, you know, they really are just stuck on a certain, it could be, you know, whatever they're researching and they're searching for an answer that just isn't there, or, you know, they're just so stubborn that they're imprisoned by that. They can't get out of it. They can't see, because so much of their self-esteem is built up in this mindset that was formed by maybe a dad who was abusive, or, you know, or someone was absent in their life, or maybe they suffered a lot of trauma. And, you know, a lot of times those things send people on a trajectory that is impossible to change by someone who's in your position, you know, and you know,
that's correct.
And I would like to,
in certain cases.
In certain cases, yeah.
In certain cases.
And I'm sure it's heartbreaking, you know,
Yeah,
and,
sure.
and you feel like, gosh, I wish I could reach them. But what can you do? You know, as parents, you know, we have to realize that really it's up to us to create people who are going to have an open enough mind to take on the things you're teaching and talking about, internalize them, accept them, and then use them in their professional life when they get older. Because if we raise kids who minds are made up, you know, say if I was a devout, if I had some religious belief that was super staunch and hardcore, and I beat it into my son that, you know, there's no room for science in your life. None, you know, and say he accepted all that. And then I send him to a university and he was taught things contrary. Well, I'm giving that, you know, biochemistry professor a very tough challenge. Yeah. And a challenge that they might not be able to overcome, you know? So it's up to us. You know, I come from a science background, so I give that as an example. It could be anything. It could be music, you know, It could be anything. It's really up to us to give, you know, as parents and all the parents out there listening, you know, this is where it all starts. And we look at today, you know, I don't want to get into the juicy stuff, you know, and start offending people, but you look at a lot of the destruction that's going on in the country right now. And I understand that there's issues that a lot of people, I myself, are incredibly angry about. Right. But when you see these kids that, you know, and I've seen some, you know, some people have done research on some of the kids in Portland that are, you know, setting Starbucks on fire and, you know, terrorizing people who are, you know, outside eating at restaurants. I've seen people do, you know, kind of write-ups on who these kids are. Yeah. A lot of them come from affluent families, and you just wonder, there's so many ways that they could affect change more effectively and more productively than going and setting a Starbucks on fire, or smashing an ATM, or terrorizing people in residential neighborhoods. And you just begin to wonder, how did that kid get to that place? And I think it's all parenting. You know, I think arming your kids, I mean... That's tough. You know, first of all, you know, there's a lot going on there. Right. So yeah, I mean, it does appear that in these cases that they are not the people causing this damage are not members of their community. Right. Right. So it's not like people in black neighborhoods are tearing up their own neighborhood. Right. That does appear to be the case. As far as what we're seeing in Portland, you know, Portland, I have friends that are from there, that live there. You and I have mutual friends that lived there, and we're very, you know, in the punk rock scene in the 90s, basically, you know, and it has... And Seattle, that whole area. We know I've visited. I've never been to Portland, but Seattle and Tacoma, I have family in Seattle. We've been there a billion times. Yeah, I mean, it's got kind of a different culture. The youth culture is very different. You know, I think, you know, so... It's all those people that burned witches back in the day in Salem. They're just Massachusetts, the different Salem. Oh, dang it. All right. Can we edit this out? It's just real pasty people. That's what it is. All right. So you know, I mean, but it's tough. It's tough to watch, and it's making it difficult for people to have a conversation, because there's very clearly, you know, we had issues with sort of white nationalist groups. You know, I mean, that's evident and obvious. Right. You know, we had Charlottesville, and I think the easy thing
about that in terms of identifying it
Yeah.
is it's so incredibly obvious.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, when you see somebody that has that kind of hate in their heart,
Right.
it's like it's the most evil form of ignorance.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And so, but we have, you know, when people act violently for other philosophical reasons, it's harder for us to grapple with philosophically, I think, because a lot of people are like myself. We center ourselves around caring, right? Around concern for others, for empathy or sympathy, empathy.
We need to have one of these people in here to explain their mindset.
No, I mean,
and not to attack them, but I would just like to understand the people who are like on the ground protesting. I want to hear. Have an in-depth conversation.
Yeah, no, I know some people who are involved in research in the social justice side of things. You know, that would be really interesting to talk to. Maybe
because there might be something.
I'm not going to name drop because I don't want to put them on the spot. But no, I have some friends who you know, and former mentors who do a lot of research there. So you know. But one of the things, going back to, for example, the issue with microaggressions and talking about that, is there's a lot of definitions that go around because these things come from a place, you know, and and that's the other thing. They're not terms like microaggression or CRT, critical race theory, and this kind of thing. Those aren't terms that grew up out of a grassroots movement, right? Those come out of the academy, you know. In the term with microaggressions, it was Gerald Wing Sue in University of Columbia Teachers College. With critical race theory, it was Derek Bell is the first black law professor at Harvard. You know, but when these terms leave the academy, you know, they take on a life of their own, and so it becomes difficult to have conversations. Not just it's difficult to begin with because the subject matter is so you know, it's where the political and the personal basically do this, you know, and it becomes so hard to have that conversation to begin with. And people I know anyways, they really want to have that earnest conversation, but there's so much noise created by just language. It's people who are speaking fundamentally in their own language.
Yeah, and in this
it
era,
makes it hard.
Yeah, this era that we're in, it's if someone is predisposed to become catalyzed to be an extremist, or if they have those feelings but they keep them subdued, they're really coming out right now. And we have an election in you know, a few months, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse. And I have figured it out. I know what we're going to do. So we're going to take Montana and we're going to put a big fence around it, and we're going to get all the rioters, and we're going to get all those Charlottesville guys. I wanted to say a bad word, but I won't. And we're going to put them all in Montana, and we're going to film them having a crazy battle. We're gonna put it on paper.
Off field.
We're gonna put it on pay-per-view, and we're gonna balance a budget with it. They're all just gonna kill each other.
No. I'm canceled.
I'm canceled. Not you. You didn't say it.
No, it's look. You know, there's in terms of what's going on specifically in Portland. You know, I've been following this pretty closely for a while, and you know, there's a lot of young people there who are using a lot of this language, and they're kind of they've been. It's not this frenzy for them is not new, and they're living a lot of times in communal, like one house, and there'll be a lot, many of them in one home.
Lots of drug use.
And they're sort of
mental
doing
illness.
whatever they can to pay the rent in that one particular place, and and
selling hacky sacks,
and it's just it's tough. To reach someone like that, and they're not allowed to speak to anyone outside.
Right.
So, okay. one of the things that everyone should be aware of if they have a loved one who's becoming involved in some kind of group,
Right.
Are they allowed to talk to anyone outside the group? Anyways, Scientology is a famous example, right? So they aren't really allowed to talk to people outside the group, and they even have a policy called disconnection, right? Where if they have someone in their life that becomes critical of the church, they have to quote unquote disconnect, right?
Wow.
And it doesn't matter if it's a loved one or whatever. And this is sort of within the literature on cults and things like that. It's like, I'm a religious Christian, and we're actually prohibited from not talking to people, right? Like we have to talk to people, and it's not. It would be a really strange thing for a Christian to adopt that sort of philosophy. That'd be really weird.
Right.
And most of the world's major religions are like that. But when you have someone who gets involved in a group and they aren't allowed to talk to anyone, that's not a good sign.
Right. Yeah.
We had some problems with it's almost impossible to not say their name. An Antifa group here in Fort Worth, they weren't allowing or they were discouraging women from reporting assaults because they were saying
in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Wow.
And actually, a mutual friend of ours confronted them about it and tried to get them to stop this practice.
That's nuts.
And they were doing it on social media, so it's not like a big secret. I'm sure you can probably find it on Facebook, no problem.
Right.
And so because they were sort of saying, don't trust the authorities, don't trust the police, they won't take care of you, this kind of thing. And so, this is obviously, that's extreme. That's super, super extreme.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we've seen the same thing from some of these kind of odd militias, kind of right-wing militias behaving the same way. There's famous, shootouts with the FBI, and this goes back to it's like an extreme version of Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind. Right. So we're seeing basically there's something that happens at a certain point where the philosophies sort of bifurcate, right? So you could go hard left and sort of hard right, but the behaviors become very similar. We always talk about left-right horseshoe thing if you go far enough. That's a little bit abstract. I don't. We could probably get into the merits of that, but that's not really what I mean. And the left-right thing, actually, just in this case of extreme behavior, I think it happens to be where someone is able to act out hatred. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's just two different sorts of groups that sanction hating another group. Right. One along, say, racial lines, and the other one along, say, class lines. Right. Yeah. Something like that. Right. And that seems to be where the literature is pointing again. And I don't want to come off as thinking that I don't have an opinion about it, but again, I'm not interested in
having Molotov cocktails thrown in your window.
No, I'm not. I'm not interested in trying to necessarily change anyone's mind. I just want to point them in the direction of information. Right. Because it's so hard to change somebody's mind. Right. It is, especially on things like this. Yeah. I care about the individual people. I care about my students. I care about the people in my life. Right. I care. And I want them to have as much info as possible. And so, I got training in my doctorate. One of the fortunate things about going to UNT is it's a Carnegie Tier 1 research university. Mm-hmm. So that talks about your kind of research training at the doctoral level, right? Mm-hmm. And the Carnegie Tier 1 means it's basically extremely high research activity. So I was writing over 100 pages of papers per semester. Mm-hmm. I think by the time, I don't know how many pages I produced by the time I finished my DMA, but it had to be nearly 1,000.
Wow.
Right. So if it's 100 to 125 a semester, you're talking somewhere around 250 per year, 4 years of coursework.
Wow.
It's 1,000, and that's not even including my dissertation. Right, which wasn't terribly long because I have a performance degree, so the length of the paper, depending on what route you take, is longer or shorter. You know, and in the course of that, I had to go through like IRB, which is internal review, and all this, and because I wanted to interview a living person, then I had to go through and get certified by the National Institute of Health and by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And I had to, you know, go through all of this training and learn about, you know, mental health and the history of, you know, all the things that we did wrong, basically, you know, and it even went through the Nuremberg trials, you know, and it went through the Tuskegee Airmen experiments and all this horrifying stuff, you know, and you know, so people go, "You're a guitar player. Why are you talking about this so much?"
Right.
That, and on top of that, I had two professors who I really loved, you know, studying with, that were, you know, really interested in making sure that people suffer as little as possible. Does it mean that I agree with everything those professors publish and say? Absolutely not.
Right.
You know, I definitely don't. But I know that I could sit down with them and we could have a discussion about it.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, it's something that we all need to figure out, and we need to sit with each other, and one of the things that makes it so difficult is we're not actually sitting with each other and talking about it.
I mean, people need to lighten up. Seriously. I mean,
it is very difficult
to
tell a joke.
We've had a pretty technical discussion, so just kind of to bring it back, you know, I grew up with a group of, I was very lucky that humor was a big part of my life.
Yeah.
And I had friends that were hilarious. And if the texts and phone calls and conversations we had ever got out into the public, we'd be committed into an insane asylum. And a part of the things that I say and the comments I make, even on this podcast, you could be offended by it if you wanted to, you know, but you got to know that our heart is not in a bad place. We joke around, and most people that you see, comedians, I see this a lot with comedians now and with cancel culture, and it kills me because I feel like we're all suppressing what we're really thinking, and those thoughts are still there, but no one's feeling like they can express it. And we're actually, I've noticed, you know, with people my age, younger, are starting to understand humor less and less. They don't understand the concept of saying something that is completely ridiculous for the sake of humor. And that's not, the person who said it is not making a stance. They're not articulating a belief. It's simply combining words together that express something completely outlandish for the sake of eliciting the laughter response, which is right next to being scared in the brain. And that's what humor is. It's a you know, that's why comedians love to get laughter, because it's an involuntary response. You know, they're you know, people obviously will fake laugh, but we all know when we truly laugh, it's not like we can actually control it. And the direction I want to see this podcast go in is Will and I being able to express humor and joke around with people knowing that, you know, although we covered a lot of serious subject matter here, people need to understand that humor is important. And I don't ever want anyone to be offended by what I'm saying. I'm simply trying to be funny.
Yeah.
And it's not my job to censor every single thing I say because I'm worried about that one or two people who are going to take what I say the wrong way. I'm just not going to do that. I'm too old. And, you know, frankly,
life's pretty short.
I'm at a point in my life where I care about those people, obviously, as people, but, you know, if something I say makes you very offended, then, man, you should never leave your house, because I'm a pretty
people
dude.
know, people who know you know that you're not trying to offend anybody, and they know the same thing about me, and that's the thing, especially doing this live, you know, it's just like anything could come flying out of our faces, you know, and you know, our mom was a radio comedian, right? That was her job. And, you know, it was the last job she had before she sort of retired.
And my heroes and Will's heroes, you know, are like Richard Pryor, George Carlin, these guys who offended so many people. And do I agree with everything he says? Of course not. No. But no way. I admire people who are willing to put it out there and who are not scared, and that force me to re-examine the way I look at life. And that's a big role humor has. And I think we're losing that. I think we are as a society. And also related, but not at the same time, why are we canceling comedians? Isn't it just known that comedians are not like role models? Well, you know, like comedians if you looked at what Richard Pryor did, or Miles Davis, or any of our artistic heroes, it's deplorable what they did to people in their lives and how they lived, but their art was amazing. So I mean, that's a really tough. There's actually an excellent documentary that came out called, it was what's his, Stephen Fry, the actor comedian. Yes, he's really funny, super talented guy. He's a huge fan of Wagner. Richard Wagner, and he's Jewish, right? And Wagner, of course, he loved the Jews.
No, Wagner, of course, was
hated the Jews.
Yes, he's a famous anti-Semite. Right.
Didn't Hitler want to play like the ring cycle?
I don't remember which one. Apparently, that was his.
He wanted
when
to
conquer the world. He was going
to play that all over the world. Everyone in the world was going to have.
So if you aren't sold on Wagner's he's awfulness, that should sell you on it right there.
But what is crazy is his scores. Didn't they have like geometric shapes and stuff in them?
Oh goodness! Yeah, now you're going to catch me. I'm not.
I remember some music history class I had.
Well,
it was like some Nicolas Cage movie sort of stuff, where you find the geometric shapes and his. Yeah. But it was a real thing he did. Anyways, I'm sorry.
I guess I need to look that up. I'm embarrassed I don't know that. But Stephen Fry is a big fan of his music, and so the whole documentary, it's called Wagner and Me, and it was available on Netflix. I don't know if it still is or not. It was about him grappling with that particular issue, and he goes to Bayreuth and visits Wagner's home and the opera house and plays on Wagner's personal piano and all this, and it's, you know, we're in that Stephen Fry moment right now, right? Because we're looking back on things like the founding of our country and slavery and these extremely difficult issues, and we are using our today's moral compass to it's kind of like this weird anachronistic battle we're having with ourselves, and it's a good thing that we're having it, right? You know, but I don't have an answer for that, right? Like I don't know how we have to. A lot of forgiveness has to happen of each other, right? And realize that we're just here. We just kind of got here. But we got to figure out all this other stuff too.
And the people I think that really, take the statues thing, with the Confederate statues. I mean, frankly, some of those statues do need to be in museums. I mean, come on.
Yeah, well, a lot of them were put up during the Civil Rights Movement, just to stick their finger in
and a lot of them too. Whenever the South was completely demolished, a lot of the communities erected these statues as a way to kind of ease the pain of loss, when there was a lot, what do they call them, carpetbaggers that came from the north,
right,
and
during
took advantage
Reconstruction.
During Reconstruction, and it was kind of a thumb in the eye of the North, So I get that, but let's take this 10 steps further, and now we're getting rid of like George Washington statues. Where does it end? If we were to take it that far, but if you do re-examine history with today's moral compass, you're going to find a lot of things that are come up short.
Yeah.
And so, I
think some of that, there's some sensationalism, right? Like, I don't think, when you look at attitudes toward things like a George Washington statue, for example, the public, regardless of their background, is not into the idea of that. So you have, basically, there's like a very few people who are this is always the way it is. You have a few people who are making a lot of noise about something that people really don't have a problem with, and it's keeping progress from happening.
Right. Yeah. No, it's true. That's why I said take it 10 steps further.
Yeah, you would have. Yeah,
you'd have to take it.
And I think
I think I'm just addressing the overall point that if you examine the life of heroes, Miles Davis, George Carlin, if you examine their lives, you're going to realize that at first they're up to the whims of the society of that time, and B, they're human, and they probably did a lot of terrible things. They probably did a lot of great things too. So what do we do with that? How do we compartmentalize those things? Do we just tear it all down? I mean, I don't think anyone wants that.
Well, it won't. It won't. So there's here's a really excellent example of what happens when you try to make that stuff disappear. Because we actually do have a very large laboratory where this has been attempted.
Mm-hmm.
So in the years after World War II. And then, and when we get the EU, in the 1970s? God.
That sounds right.
All right. I'm sorry, EU friends. I think it was the 1970s.
How dare you?
Anyways, coming up to more modern day, they drafted laws in the EU which made it illegal to deny the Holocaust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, that's a horrible thing to do. I mean,
to deny the Holocaust.
Yeah, I mean, you have
definitely
to,
not.
You have to be. You have to be some kind. I don't even understand where that would come from. It couldn't be any place good. But anyways. So then let's observe what happens in terms of law in the EU. Like, does this pay out like in any other way? Is there a payout? Like, do you gain anything from that?
Right.
Well, there aren't. I guess you couldn't say anything out loud, but for example, one of the Geert Wilders, who's the Dutch Party for Freedom far right group in a Dutch far right group, one of his right hand men, they had to remove him because he was doing exactly that.
Oh wow!
For example, and they're very and Geert Wilders. It apparently is very popular. I actually saw a news story on the BBC. There had to be 10,000 people listening to him talk or something. It was incredible. In Denmark, they have enacted what they call the Ghetto Laws, which is really remarkable in a very bad way. So they're not allowed because of Danish law, their constitution, I suppose, doesn't allow discrimination based on race. Well, what they've done instead is they've drafted, last time I checked, this was in like July of 2018 when I last looked at this, there were 22 laws which were drafted, the Ghetto Laws. There were 25 proposed and 22 passed. Anyone who's in this area, they instead drew areas around the map where they had refugees who commit a crime from that area.
Wow.
Is subject to twice the penalty of someone who's outside of one of these areas.
Wow.
Yeah. And then you have groups like the Swedish SDU, which is a far-right group, and they have in their platform things that are, anti refugee. We're talking about mostly Syrian refugees, of course, but also against the Romanian population and against Jewish people. And they're last I checked, the second or third most powerful group in political group in Sweden. And last I checked, also they had 2 seats in the EU Parliament.
Wow.
Right. In Italy, you have the League and you have Five Star. You know, which I need to see. I don't know what the elections look like now, but you know, in the year or so after Donald Trump was elected, then the Five Star and the League took over. Those are their furthest right groups, right? In France, neither of the liberal groups made it to the runoff. It was Marine Le Pen from the French National Front, who was their furthest right group, and that group had not got more than I think maybe 5% in decades and decades. Then
you have Brexit.
You got Brexit, of course.
And Donald Trump.
And you've got I think the FN, the French National Front, got 40%.
Wow.
Right. So
it's swinging back.
So what
it'll go back the other way.
Right. My point is, what does censorship buy you? What it buys you is the creation of a taboo. Right. So if you censor something, if you say you cannot listen to this anymore, you cannot watch this, you cannot have these discussions, you cannot laugh at this comedian, you create a taboo. And we're in the age of the internet, and people can download whatever they want.
Yeah.
You know, except for you can't find the unedited version of the Star Wars trilogy without all the CGI in it, which is really frustrating.
That's the real crime.
But you can people, you know, and it's a real problem. And so I don't think that censorship is quite right. You know, exactly. I mean, obviously you can't allow people to threaten violence. You know, that's already against the law in the United States. You know, you can't threaten violence against an identifiable person or group. You can't yell fire on a crowded movie theater. You know, there's certain things that are pretty obvious. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Like people, we need to remember how to laugh. You know, we need to remember how to have conversations with one another. Yeah. You know, and it's really unfortunate that we're having such a hard time with this. Yeah. You know, and
humor being such a huge part of both of our lives, it's been amazing to see how, you know, this thing called cancel culture has affected so many comedians that, you know, like I think, you know, one of the more obvious examples is Kevin Hart had a tweet like 12 years ago, I remember, you know, and Kevin Hart, if you look at his Instagram, he's so positive and inspirational, and he has so many charities, and he does this, you know, such a good person, yet, you know, they attempted to cancel this person who does so much for, you know, the black community and, you know, everyone, you know, who is, you know, interacts with him on social media or whatever.
Well, he has a big, I don't know if it's a foundation where he's trying to teach finance.
Yeah, through Chase Bank.
Through Chase Bank. He's trying to teach finance in urban areas and economically challenged neighborhoods and that kind of thing.
So the point is, you know,
awesome.
What does this person who's clearly changed, because of this thing he wrote when he was let's face it, the person you were 12 years ago is dead, and they're gone. Right. That person does not exist anymore. Most people.
I mean, I hope so. I don't want to be the person I was 12
I don't
years
either.
Ago. I might like to feel and look like I did 12 years ago, but I don't want to be that person.
But do they ever get forgiveness? You know, and do we stop the all the great work he's doing now because of this? And so, you know, I think we just love to run around with torches and say, you know, him, you know, in a group. And that's what Twitter is. Twitter is a directionless group. You know, normally people get together to do something like, you know, go to church or a concert or something. But on Twitter, it's just a group there. And it's all like, if someone goes, get him, and then a group goes over there, and then there's another one, get him, you know. And next thing you know, I mean, people lose their careers and their lives. Over this stuff.
And there's even a lot of debate as to whether or not what we call cancel culture is real. And you know, I'm not This is tough. So people either have to take me at my word or not. I have people who are dear to me from the academy who have been removed from the academy or forced into removing themselves on some level because of this. And these are people who actually are very thoughtful and actually didn't harm anyone. There was no abuse involved in any level. I know the details of this, and again, people are just gonna have to take my word for it because I can't. I just won't divulge things that were told to me in confidence. But forgiveness is an amazing experience. Not just for someone who's done something wrong, but for the person who's had wrong done to them. And this has just been in my personal, my personal space, because everybody's had wrong things done to them. And just to forgive somebody, you all of a sudden it's like you escape from this terrible
it's like a weight lifted
place, and I would like a lot more conversation about forgiveness, and I think that if we're able to understand grace a little better, that would go a long way. And not only that, but people who are involved in quote unquote canceling. I don't like this snowflake or cancel culture or any stuff. I don't like any of that because it prohibits a certain population from even listening.
Right.
And as a teacher, that just gives me hives.
Right.
It's not that it's not a thing. It's not that cancel culture isn't real. And there are people on the left that talk about it.
Yeah.
John McWhorter talks about it.
And I think cancel culture is an easier one because you see people. I mean, I've seen a lot of, my favorite entertainers who are very liberal, who have been negatively impacted by this. It's not just people on the right. It's pretty much equal. Down the line. So I feel like cancel culture is a little more palatable.
Right.
Well,
and you're right, and it's not like saying snowflake.
That's a Ben Shapiro thing. You hear that from that. What's the other one? There's all those pundits on the right. That snowflake. That elicits exactly what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, it's a snowflake or say deplorable or something. It's such. And all of a sudden you can't talk to anybody.
Yeah, exactly.
But cancel culture, you're right. There are plenty of people on the left, including Matt Iglesias, who writes for Vox, has talked about cancel culture, and he's one of the founders, he and
even in politics.
Ezra Klein,
even in politics, on the left and right. And sometimes it's totally warranted.
Well, no,
they needed to be excised from...
No, it's not all things. Not all things are survivable. Obviously there are offenses that go beyond. That's.
I think we're more speaking towards the things that fall into the realm of forgivable,
like sloppy speaking,
just that
kind of thing. But also if you're wanting to improve the world, which conceivably anybody who is involved in going after someone, you'd think that they're doing that because they believe that they're making the world a better place. But you don't disappear people. Like, those people don't disappear. And it's kind of like this issue, like I was talking about with the laws in EU. You create parallel economies of thought.
Yeah.
And parallel economies of space. It's not like, if you get off of Twitter, you can go to some place like, very famously, there's Gab, which is apparently, I've never been on it, but apparently there's no rules. It's like the Wild West there. And there are some really terrible people on there. And
it's like the Twitter for people who are kicked off of Twitter, basically.
Yeah, that's kind of what I gather. And I don't want to speak out of school because I've never actually been on there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sounds like madness to me.
Yeah.
But these people, they don't just disappear. It's not like Thanos and they just snap and they just, they all turn into dust.
Yeah, I think the big one is Alex Jones. He's probably the most censored, pundit or political.
Yeah, he's been removed from
talking
like
everything.
every platform.
I don't think there's another show or personality who's been more censored than him. And he's more popular than ever.
Yeah, it creates a taboo, and I noticed this whenever Facebook started censoring anti-vaxxer
or flat Earth is another one.
They censor flat Earth too.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I don't know why, because it just seems like you just would know that the world is round, and so you just let them stay there because
they're gonna hit the ice wall
because it's funny, I guess. I mean,
they think it's an ice wall, right?
Yeah. I watched.
Okay, I got to give a plug to the Flat Earth podcast. I don't know, you'll probably never see this, but your intro song is genius.
Oh no!
There's an intro, so if anyone out there wants to laugh,
was it on that documentary that was on Netflix?
I'm sure it was,
Netflix
but I
documentary dork.
I went on a rabbit hole one night on Flat Earth, and I there's a podcast dedicated, and they have scientists on that, their whole thing is like proving it's real. And but there's this intro song. Please, everyone, go listen to it. Okay. It is so funny. Yeah. It will make you laugh so hard. I'm a fan of the ridiculous, and that definitely, guys, if you ever listen to this, nothing but respect. You got an interesting thing going on, but I find you completely ridiculous and funny. So maybe that's what they're really doing. Maybe that's
it doesn't appear to be hurting anyone.
No, I don't think so.
It's basically fine.
Yeah,
they just won't fly very long in the same direction.
It's funny though.
They're afraid to do that.
So
they will only go straight for so long.
Right. So what's funny is all these groups have splinter groups that they're even like, those people are crazy. So you have the anti-vaxxers, right?
Yeah.
And the anti-vaxxers think the flat Earth people are ridiculous. Okay. Who would the flat Earthers think are?
The world is on a turtle's back. People.
No. Look this up. Space is fake.
Space is fake.
Hashtag space is fake. This is a real thing. There is a group that even the flat earthers have rejected.
So in flat Earth, they believe that there is an outer space.
Yeah, they do.
But what does it look like?
I don't know. But the flat earthers have a splinter group that they don't think space is real.
They think we're in some kind of weird, metaphysical Truman Show?
I don't know. I haven't gone that far down into the rabbit hole, but I probably will tonight because I'm
going to.
Yeah, I need to know the answers to this. But if you're interested in flat Earth, there is a ton of resources on trying to convince you that the Earth is flat. I mean, they're out there. And the funniest thing about it is they think surrounding the Earth is, so they believe that there's poles, right? Mm-hmm. But the poles, if the globe is, if you take, how you see the picture of the Earth and it's it's basically cut like an orange peel and you can see everything. You see those maps.
Yeah, sure.
So they think that's what the Earth is like, but those poles, the north and south poles, actually extend around the circumference of that Earth. And they create an ice wall. And if you go far enough out on the ocean, north or south, when we get to the poles and we get to all the, icebergs and whatever, it's actually a wall.
Eventually, like on Game of Thrones?
Yeah, eventually if you go far enough,
an ice wall? Or what?
Those icebergs will turn into a massive wall, but we've just never gotten there before. We haven't seen it. That is kind of the...
How would we not see it?
I don't know. And then people, there's just, I don't know. There's so many reasons why you should think this is wrong, but they believe it and they're so hardcore about it.
Yeah.
And it is, I'm stirring up a hornet's nest here because they're very fervent.
No. Well, we should tag him in this for sure.
Yeah,
nothing will help a podcast like some controversy.
Yeah, the space is fake people. I'm a little afraid of them. Let's back off on that. Right, so they might actually end up stalking.
Yeah, well, it's that's the thing. With the That's like an awesome rabbit trail. Now I have to go. I have to go look at these people. I almost forgot what I was even going to say because I'm just so enraptured by this idea of
space
of an ice wall. Like, because I don't know if you know seen any, like in Game of Thrones, they have this big like ice wall that goes.
Oh, do they? I guarantee you that.
And it was constructed, you know, at some point, and it keeps stuff from coming in, you know, to the where all the humans live. Anyways. Yeah, I don't know how you arrive at that conclusion. I mean, because if the Earth is flat, like, couldn't you just get a telescope?
You could, yeah. And then how do you explain?
Because you would just look through the telescope in one direction,
right? And eventually you would see it.
And it would just be there. Like, just go to a coast, like go to California and just like look through the telescope.
Yeah, so that's, you know, you're asking one of the big questions that they always get. There's a few of them. So, because I wanted to see how they defend themselves, you know, because
really strange.
So there's a satellite, a Japanese satellite that it's like 2 minutes takes a picture of the Earth, and it, you know, orbits the Earth. Every 2 minutes, it takes a picture. Its trajectory slightly changes. And I can't remember the name. You could look it up. A Japanese camera orbiting the Earth. You can Google it. But the camera gets changed every, you know, year or so. And the photos that it takes are amazing. I mean, if you've ever seen, you know, these incredibly high resolution pictures of the Earth, most likely, you know, it was from this Japanese satellite or one similar to it. It's kind of the one everyone point to whenever, you know, there's a natural disaster or something and they want footage of it from, you know, miles away from the surface of the Earth. Anyways, so the big debate is this satellite has been orbiting the Earth for years, and then we have, you know, thousands and thousands of pictures of the Earth through every season, and clearly, you know, if you look at, you know, a droplet of oil in water, or, you know, the most efficient shape for any object having an applied force on every direction is a sphere.
Okay.
The gravitational force on a rotating, you know, ball.
No, you're the guy. You're the physics guy.
So in every law of physics points to the sphere being the most efficient, you know, shape for an object to take on with applied force on every side.
Okay.
And from, lunar launches to this Japanese telescope or a satellite to images that we have from commercial satellites and things like that, we have mountains and mountains of evidence beyond just the theoretical physics that show that the Earth not only is a sphere, but it has to be.
Right.
It has to be. Something that is flat could not sustain that shape with the gravitational force of the sun applied to it, you know, not to mention all the other, you know, large, you know, objects being planets, also having this force applied to it. So the big question is we have this body of knowledge that, I hate to use the word settled science, but it kind of is. You still believe that the Earth is flat. Why? We have picture evidence. We have theoretical. Their answer, and they always go back to this, is that physics is a lie. Mm-hmm. Everything we've been taught is from the government, whoever that is, meant to control our minds. Everybody's in cahoots with everybody. Yeah.
All of a sudden, we're in like a 1930s detective novel, and we use the word cahoots again. We never say cahoots.
Yeah,
unless we're talking about conspiracies. As soon as we start talking about the Earth and vaccines, cahoots.
That should be the name of this episode. And so NASA, if you bring up NASA, oh man, they'll go like NASA is this breakaway civilization run by ex-Nazis that is trying to co-opt the government. It is nutso land.
Yeah. Well,
so guys, I've actually researched your stuff. What camera am I on?
We're in the middle right now.
Okay. I respect the work you've put into it, but I mean, come on.
Right.
Seriously?
Well, well, you know, and that's the thing, is this stuff can be really, really absurd, and you know, and it can reach a certain I heard, I think it was Thomas Sowell said something that was arguments reach a certain level of absurdity that they become invincible.
Yeah.
I thought, like, oh, okay, that's pretty funny.
That reminds me of Freud saying that the Irish are impervious to psychoanalysis. Like, yeah, it's kind of true.
Fair. You know, the thing is, you know, what I saw happen in the days after, and however it's been months since Facebook implemented this sort of policy of pulling down anti-vaccination stuff. Immediately, you know, the people I know that lean on that side, and I don't know many, but I know a few, were taking screen caps of them being censored, you know, Facebook putting the gray over it or whatever, and pulling it down, and then publishing it as if proof that they are correct. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. They're a martyr now.
Yeah. See, and this is what it earns you. I think ultimately with censorship, that's what you get.
Yeah.
You're going to have a taboo, and you have people that use the censorship, like you said, it's a sort of they're kind of an ideological martyr. Look what Mark Zuckerberg did to me, you know, over the weekend.
Right.
You know, I must be on to something.
Yeah, I must be on to something. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. I'm getting too close.
Right. I'm validating.
Please read this before they take it down.
Right.
That's that's one of the new memes I see a lot on Facebook. Please read this before Facebook takes it down.
Right.
You know, and people,
no, it's so true.
People do.
So
people
true.
will see that, and they will read it, and they will share it, because and it may never get taken down. In the case of some of them, they don't. It's just something that people put as a tag, and like as like a meme. It's like a new meme, basically, that's kind of taken hold.
Sometimes I feel like a lot of these groups they want it to be taken down. You know what I mean? They want to create content.
Sure.
Because if they do get censored, then it just like what you're saying, it's validation.
Yeah.
There's a book that just came out. I'm not going to say the author, but the title of the book is "Don't." I don't want to. Should I go here? I don't want to make this guy mad. I mean, he's never going to see it, but
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'll skip it. I'll just keep it to
we'll cover it in post.
Yeah. Okay.
To our Patreon subscribers, you can listen to the name of this book.
All right. How many people are listening right now? 4?
Right now, we've got there's 4 people on our YouTube, and I don't know how many on Facebook, because
I'm going to say this now, and if we decide to take it out, then we'll take it out.
It's live. We can't take it out.
Oh, you're just going to publish this?
It's already publishing right now.
Oh, okay. Dang it. I want to say it so bad. I just don't want to make this guy mad if he ever saw it, because he's a cool guy. I don't want to make him mad. But he's kind of ridiculous.
I think I know who you're talking.
All right, let's skip it.
Maybe we can do it. We can do a whole show probably on that guy.
Okay.
So anyways,
space.
We've censored ourselves. Yeah. Now they're going to be putting.
Well, I've censored myself not because.
No, I do it all the time.
Yeah. Well, I'm
a teacher. I've done it like 50 times since we started. We push play.
Oh yeah, I know. Let me be the one to get us in trouble. No, I'm just kidding.
Go ahead.
And this is a good topic to cover, and that is that, you know, a lot of people I really respect, you know, and I don't necessarily believe everything that they believe, but there's a certain amount of tipping the hat or paying your dues to certain elements to get your bigger message out. Mm-hmm. You know,
like, can you give me an example?
One would be, you kind of brought it up with the Jonathan Haidt book, and that was calling it the coddling of the American mind. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. That's
you know, so Jonathan Haidt, he's a brilliant, articulate researcher, and I have a lot of respect for him. I'm not familiar with this book. I'm familiar with his other work. That's not a title I would have suspected he would have agreed to, but he had to pay his due to the publisher, because that title clearly is going to move books off of shelves.
Yeah.
I mean, people are going to buy it because it's a red meat title, and there's a certain amount of that the people we respect have to do to appeal. And then there's of course the story, the story of the rock band who wants to stay true to their roots, but they get suckered in.
Sell out.
They won't sell out.
Never sell out.
They get suckered into cutting their hair.
Yeah. Ask any Green Day fan how they like old school Green Day fan.
Yeah,
like from way back in the day.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
So there's a certain amount of paying your dues that everyone has to do, and that the person I was going to bring up, who I'm not going to, I think clearly did that. And
we'll revisit this topic. I think.
Yeah.
I think I know. Yeah, it's.
And I think that I get it. It's a part of business.
Yeah,
it's a part of there's a reality of having to make sure the publisher at least makes their money back for printing up all these books.
Oh yeah, you're on the hook for some of that stuff.
Yeah,
it's the way a lot of people don't realize this, but the old school recording contracts, that's basically a loan.
Yeah.
For
and studio time and
you were operating on a loan. And a lot of the times when you hear about these rock stars and stuff that went bankrupt, it's because they partied off their loan.
Yeah.
They got this loan to put out this album based on what the projected sales were going to be, and then the album bombs.
Right.
And now they are out all this cash.
Right.
And you're like, how did they end up in the street? It's like, that's how.
And, they probably, if they would have pumped out another hit or two, the record companies would have left them alone and said, hey, just let these guys be Pink Floyd. They're clearly, but once you start, you're not selling records anymore. Now these voices start to have more control and, hey, cut your hair. Hey, wear this. Hey, do that. Try this. Change your sound, get rid of the guitar solo, whatever it is. And I think that happens in every medium.
Sure. It happens it happens in political punditry. It happens.
Oh,
and obviously it happens with our politicians. I mean, they can't even tell us the truth ever.
Right. Exactly.
It really makes people feel out,
And polling, I think, is the big motivator. I think if you see one of your favorite politicians changing course on a topic, or if they start to push a message more, just look at how they're polling on that topic. And those pollsters and those campaign managers, I think that their ear is always to the wind as to how people are feeling about certain things. But think about it. What are these people? They're elected representatives.
Right.
They're kind of supposed to reflect the winds. We elect them hoping that, there's some moral backbone there. But at the end of the day, they have to be voted in, and they have to pay attention to what, their constituents are saying. And so,
it's a double-edged sword with any of this stuff. And even if you removed, say, capitalism from it, you still have, the new currency is then power. Right. The power gets seated somewhere, it doesn't come by through, currency, but it will come by means of time and labor and, and control over organization and that kind of thing. And it's just something that unfortunately that we seem to just do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Survival.
Well, we've been going for
almost 2 hours.
And we've had a few people hanging with us, and it will be up on our channel. So
Space is fake. Hashtag.
Look up Space is fake. No, I mean we covered some tough topics. This is really difficult stuff, and it's not something that either of us takes lightly. And we were like, well, how are we going to talk about this stuff? But you really can't. I mean, you can't not talk about it.
Right.
If you have information, it's important to say, or even if that information is wrong, it's important to be able to say it out loud.
Yeah.
And learn. And not be afraid.
Yeah,
and say something.
And when the cameras and the mics are off, to the people in my personal life, I know in Will's personal life, don't be afraid to tell us what you really think.
Yeah, I mean, reach out to us, text message us,
And I love dirty, offensive jokes of all kinds, and I always will, because I recognize the fact that that doesn't represent your soul. It's just a funny thing to say to make me laugh. And we need to laugh more because we're all stuck in our houses and doing DoorDash every day. So
no, and if there's any topics you're interested in hearing us talk about, or interesting people you'd like us to have on, please let us know. You can reach us at contact@humantrialspodcast.com, and our website is up and going now. So you can find us at humanitriespodcast.com.
Mm-hmm.
You can find us on Twitter at humantrialspod, as they make you shorten it. And then on Instagram, we're at humantrialspodcast. So almost everywhere we're actually our full name. But thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking with us. This has been super interesting, and we hope to see and hear from all of you again very soon.
Space is fake.